fourth and final session for the digital forum. I'm just going to quickly do the housekeeping, which is, as of all our other sessions, we are recording and we will make this available later on our website. So if you could keep on mute, that would be really helpful. And we're also captioning, and you can access the captions in the bottom right hand. And now I'm going to hand over to Heather.
Thank you very much, Emma. Well, welcome everybody. It's been an amazing day yesterday. I unfortunately couldn't catch this morning's session, but I understand it was really good as well. So I'm really pleased to be here. So in this session, we're going to be looking both backwards and forwards. We're going to be asking, what have we learned about engaging with online audiences from our rather frantic experiences earlier this year? And how's that going to impact on what we do in the future? So a really big warm welcome to our three speakers who will share their very different experiences. They are Mark O'Brien, Artistic Director and CEO of Axis Ballymun, who, because he runs a creche in his building, is actually in his office. Aren't we jealous? Louise Donlon, Director of Lime Tree Theatre and Chair of the NASC network of venues, and Caroline Kennedy, who's the Communications and Development Manager at Dublin Dance Festival. We're going to finish with a Q&A to allow you to ask questions, and then Samantha is going to put us into breakout rooms so that we can share our own experiences. So I hope you'll be able to play an active role in this session. As a marketer, though, I must admit that I find digital pretty daunting, especially over the past 12 months. It's kind of limitless. There are so many platforms, so many creative possibilities, and there's always someone else, usually a colleague, suggesting one more platform, one more post, one more tweet. And actually, sometimes the effort I feel we put in just doesn't seem worth it when you just get, I don't know, 3 likes on a post. So how do we identify our priorities? Well, the space has developed a toolkit for developing online audiences with a really clear process to help us find the answers. So an even bigger warm welcome to Rob Lindsay, the Space's head of audiences, who's going to give us a guided tour. Over to you, Rob.
Thanks, Heather. Hi, everybody. So I'm here to talk about the Space's online audiences toolkit. We produced this actually pre-lockdown, pre-COVID, about 6 months beforehand, based upon a lot of the most commonly occurring questions that we were getting from organizations, specifically about how to create fantastic digital art, fantastic online art with the audiences that it deserved. We pulled together a number of different resources and training materials that we had, workshop materials that we had, as well as a lot of experiences from that year, which thankfully have continued to be relevant as well. I'm going to talk through a little bit about what you'll find in there. It's all available on the Spaces website, and we will post a link in the chat as well so that you can have a look. But I thought it might be worth, just chatting through some of the things that you'll find there, just with a couple of headlines. We'll talk obviously about what we mean by online audience engagement as well. I think putting aside the subtly different definitions that arts, digital and broadcast all give to that phrase, your aims for audience engagement will naturally be unique to you. They will be unique to the central artwork, they'll be unique to your organization, they'll be unique to your audience. For some, you might be wanting to build communities or particular pieces of activity around a particular artwork or event. For some, you might be looking for qualitative responses to work. For some, you may need numbers and brass tacks to support future funding applications. So it's important to explore the different meanings as well as the different metrics, the different directions you might move in order to try and set something up for success, choosing what that success is going to be. With these metrics, the toolkit will talk through how to do an online audiences audit, establishing where your existing audience are, what materials that they're engaging with in what places, where they are clicking through to where you need them to, where they are having conversations on those platforms or engaging in the way you need them to natively. We talked briefly about this yesterday, but it's worth noting that there is a big difference between your follower account in a different place, or the visitors to your site, and then what actually happens when people are there. Someone who followed you 10 years ago when you first set up a Facebook account may well not still have an active account. If someone deletes Twitter from their phone, it doesn't mean that their account unfollows you. And it can be really useful to look at what specific interaction you're getting with the material that you put out, rather than looking at follow accounts. Equally, just because you once convinced someone to follow you, it does not mean that you have been replaced in their feed by people who offer more compelling, more consistently engaging content. That's not about budget. Paid content makes up only about 25% of your feed. I think every fourth post on Facebook at the moment, and between every third and fifth on Instagram. That means that 3/4 of your audience's timeline is made up of unpaid content, the people, the pages, and the groups that they've chosen to follow. On Twitter, paid content is still relatively infrequent. So you've got a huge 75% of that space on that timeline that's going directly from people and pages to their followers, with no paid boosts, no transactions. But what's not acknowledged, however, enough, is that there is still massive amounts of competition within that group, with the most engaging content being prioritized. And again, this isn't about paid spend. Your friends and family do not appear in your feed due to their massive marketing budgets. Those that manage to secure ongoing attention and engagement do so by being consistently interesting, by being consistently reliable. This is a challenge. For those of you working at venues in particular, where your messages often are not consistent, we have lots and lots of different overlapping audience demographics. And an audience who follows us due to their interest in musical theatre may not be interested in our messages about contemporary dance, or donor schemes, or studio renovations, or photographic exhibitions, or children's workshops, or stand-up comedy, or any of the other different things that we have to offer. But by assessing where you are currently gaining traction on those different platforms and understanding who your audience are, it will allow you to understand who you're currently speaking to and who you still need to reach. The toolkit will also explore how to reach those new demographics as well, how to find the audiences that individual pieces of work deserve. Sometimes this might be about putting your work in the places that people already inhabit online, going to the rooms where those parties are already taking place. Or sometimes it might be about guiding them to where your work already sits, with breadcrumbs of material that inform and entice. Just as an analog show, an in real life show, a live show would be supported with flyers and posters and radio advertising, telling people where they need to be and when and what benefit they will get if they do that. I talked yesterday about how some platforms may be better suited to you, or better suited to a particular campaign or work than others, and how you should feel able to decide that a platform isn't right. That should feel like an informed decision for you, rather than maintaining blanket coverage across every new platform opportunity that arises. You can often achieve more with a more focused strategy, and let's be honest, you may be able to finish your day's work earlier as well. The playbook is going to talk through some of the benefits and shortcomings of some of those major platforms, and hopefully at the same time give you an understandable framework with which to assess new platforms that come down the pipeline, new opportunities. This is not as simple as saying that audio should automatically go on SoundCloud, or video should go on YouTube. There are elements of discoverability, how your audience find things, the competition you have on platforms, as well as what happens next. What are the mechanics available not just to you as a publisher, but also to your audience as a community of fans and supporters and ambassadors? what mechanics are available to them as well. It may be that you need to use platforms in tandem. It may be you want to benefit from the mechanics that are offered by more than one site or channel or app. More practically, the toolkit will also talk through some suggested do's and don'ts for making great social content based on some of the projects that we've seen soar and projects that we've seen stumble. It can be as simple as understanding the difference between a movie trailer and an online ad, or a shareholders show reel and something you might put out to launch the new season. There are audience behaviors online it's really worth being aware of, because they can cause your content to stumble in the first 5 seconds of someone reading, someone watching, someone listening. I want to stress as well that these suggestions should not be seen as restrictions for artwork itself or requirements for commissions. A piece of digital art can be made in complete isolation, just as a piece of non-digital work can be, as long as it is supported by marketing materials that acknowledge what captures an audience's attention, what communicates what you are offering in exactly the same way that, yeah, a live show or exhibition or event would need the same thing. We'll talk through in that toolkit. There are discussions as well about seeding, all of those PR disciplines that I'm sure we've been doing for live work for many, many, many years, more years than we care to imagine. And it will talk through the benefits of taking exactly that same approach with your digital work as well, with your digital material as well. It's one of the things that singularly separates successful content from non-successful content, is that level of additional amplification, that level of additional support that you'll get from other people. And it's what separates successful content from non-successful content, is that little extra piece of legwork. And those skills, those disciplines are absolutely in the wheelhouse of all of us here. As I say, it is things that we have been doing for many, many years. There is also discussions of search engine optimization. There is more on the social media algorithms as well, how to understand what they're doing and how your audience are receiving different things. And finally, the toolkit will offer guidance again on metrics and reporting. So if you have established what success is going to look like, if you have established what specific engagement you're seeking for a particular project or a particular item that's going out, it will allow you to, it will support you in measuring that, in finding out what are the reports that are going to allow you to take insight and take action based on that insight, rather than simply having lots and lots of numbers. You might have graphs going up and up and up and up and up, but if it isn't actually changing or informing the decisions that you make in the short term and the long term future, it's just a curve. I would also say that the last few months have been a massive leveler. Our audience behavior has changed enormously. There have been spikes of audience appetite for experimentation. There have been spikes of audience appetite for inclusion, for innovation, all of these different things. I think many of us that previously did have graphs, hopefully going from the bottom left to the top right, may have found that those lines have got a lot more wobbly. And this is an opportunity for us to take time to reflect and to try and build ourselves some new benchmarks. Hopefully the toolkit will enable you to do this. It will get some words on a blank page if that's previously been intimidating, and it will crucially give shared reference points for internal conversations that you might be having between yourself and the rest of your team or your collaborators, or just to try and crystallize a few things in your own mind if you are working in silo. We'll pop the link into the chat so that you can have a look. As I say, it's split up into different sections, and you'll see the names of who's authored what as well from the team. So I'd encourage you to have a look. And with that, I'll stop there and hand back. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Rob. Wow, I didn't know about the 3/4 of the timeline being unpaid content. That's a tad scary, actually. I mean, you say we need to be consistently and reliably interesting. I was really struck in the toolkit that your comments about how much damage is done by content that doesn't have a high engagement, or rather content that has a low engagement. Can you say a little bit about that, and maybe define what is interesting? Because I'm not sure we get that. Like, I get a daily tweet from an orchestra at 4 o'clock, which is a picture of the cake that they're eating in the office.
Yeah, absolutely. I've been guilty as well of I think behind the scenes marketing office posts. I've seen quite a lot of as well, where people are flicking through pages of season brochures without actually allowing the information in that brochure to get out there. I think there are things that go out that I think aren't always engaging as we hope they will be. Those platforms are constantly assessing if you're still as engaged and as interested in the people that you follow as you were when you chose to follow them. If you go on any of your social platforms, have a look through the people and pages, the groups and communities that you once chose to follow. Go through your own list of the people you yourself are following. You will find people that you've forgotten about, that you're surprised to see there. You will find people and think, gosh, they haven't posted for years. And then you click through to their profile and they've posted plenty. But what's happened is those platforms have been serving that material to you. And if you don't like or share or comment, or if you don't engage with someone's content 5 or 6 times, and in the meantime, you are liking, sharing and commenting on other material, the publisher who posted the material that you are engaging with is going to be shuffled to the top. They're going to be prioritized. We're all following far more people than we could possibly hope to pass the content of at any given session. If you think you're following 100 people on a particular platform, if they all posted, it's going to take more time than we've got to go through all of that. And so what those channels are doing is they are going through and they are paying attention to what you like, pay attention to what you ignore, and it's shuffling out the stuff that you ignore. We as publishers, I think that is very challenging to us, to put things out that constantly do generate engagement. They generate some sort of action, some sort of activity. And it's hugely important to try and generate some of that. We shouldn't just be publishing things and then assuming it'll take care of itself. We should be posting things on Twitter knowing that someone is going to retweet it because perhaps we've already had a conversation with another channel. I know the BBC are very good at this. If BBC Three posts a piece of sports content, they have already sent an email to the BBC Sports channel to say, will you reshare this? If they post comedy, they've already sent a message out to BBC Comedy securing a share from them as well. If they do anything about science and nature, equally, there are all these different pages, these big networks of it. It's really important to get those things in place. And I think really crucially as well, it's worth having discussions internally, because I think social media in particular, because we don't have to pay to set up an account, can be enormously devalued in the eyes of our colleagues. And you may well find that you have one colleague asking you to put something out about a young writers program, and at the same time another colleague is asking you to put out a message saying, please remember us in your will. These can be quite jarringly different audiences that we're trying to talk to at the same time. And I think there can sometimes be an element of, let's just sling it up there. Let's just quickly sling something up on Facebook or Twitter or Instagram. And I think it is really worth considering that if you're going to put something up that isn't going to get engagement, that's one step closer to being shuffled off people's timelines. Yeah, I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, that's really helpful, Rob. Declan's asking, he's a big Facebook user. He's saying if he shares somebody else's post on his personal page to support their project, he might get a handful of likes or comments. But if I download their photo or poster or whatever and repost it as my own original news, it will get far more reaction. Why might that be?
I think it's an interesting one, isn't it? There is an element of your endorsement of something counting for more than something appearing in a feed from someone that I don't know. But equally, you're the person that I've chosen to follow. So there is an element of someone liking a post where they are supporting the person that posted it. And if you have reshared something, that's almost like secondhand support, if that makes sense. There is an element of endorsement. There is an ambassadorial element to that. but yeah, I would never put aside the fact that if my dad shared a movie trailer, I might like it as much because it says something about my dad as it says something about the film that it's advertising. Does that make sense? There's a kind of extra layer being put in there. And yeah, if it is a photo or something like that, I might be supporting my dad's photography as much as I'm liking a picture that he had previously liked. I hope that makes sense. I think I got a bit cumbersome there.
There's a great bit in the, a great chunk in the toolkit about social media algorithms and how things get chosen, and some really good links at the end of the toolkit to other materials. So yeah, interesting one. Yeah, I think your comment, Rob, about how each of us will do things differently are going to be really underscored when we hear from our three speakers who are going to talk about what it all looks like in practice. You know, the toolkit's a great framework, but what does it look like? And I'm going to start off with Mark, because Axis was really quick off the mark in developing loads of digital programming. And you could see immediately that that had taken just such wholehearted commitment to digital. And I wonder, Mark, what drove that?
My head's exploding with all the information over the last couple of days. So I suppose, like, taking stock, which we've kind of only really had the chance to do post-Christmas, it's been really interesting to look back on why we made the approach that we did, or why we did the approach that we did. I think, interestingly, we still are coming to a completion of a strategic planning to develop a new strategic plan for the organization. So back in January, February last year, we were looking at kind of what we are, you know, what we do, how we do it, how can we, you know, do it more. But the big thing for us, when we had, on the day that on the day the schools closed, where the restrictions started to come in, we had delegates from Scotland, Sweden and Belgium in our theatre who had just arrived that morning, and they were due to be here for 3 days as part of a climate and the arts seminar. So we spent most of that day booking flights home for them. So literally I gathered all the team together, and we just decided that we knew what was coming, but that as a building we were going to have to close, but as an organization we certainly weren't. So I suppose once we made that decision, then we looked at what we wanted to do, not what we could do, because I think that came later. I think what we wanted to do as an organization. So again, we kind of went back to what we normally do, and what we're here to do is to, you know, engage in our communities, be they our local community, be they the artists that we work with, our stakeholders. We wanted to make and support the development of work, and we wanted to make and support and create a space for people to engage with their and others' creativity. So starting from there, we went, okay, it's not so much what we can't do. We all know that. And that was the big kind of cloud to keep out of the room. It's like, because so much conversations had been about what can't we do? We're kind of going, okay, we know we can't do any of that, but what is it possible to do? Then our abilities came into play. So where were our main resources? And the main resources in the arts and in society and in communities are people. So we looked to our staff, we talked to our staff, and even though, you know, in normal times, whereas there are roles in the organization, we would have a very blended development structure here, where everyone, as much as possible, is involved in decision making and the way it. So we discovered that we all now were in the wider role of programming and de facto marketing, whether that's institutional marketing or programmatic marketing. So at the very beginning, then we kind of went, okay, what do we need to kind of skill up on? We had just at that juncture moved ticketing company to Ticketsolve, and that turned out to be an amazing boon for us through the first year, because our ticketing system became something very different than just selling shows. It became a portal for what we kind of have now christened internally our kind of virtual theaters or virtual spaces. And then we kind of went, okay, but a huge part of it is in relation to our engagement with our communities. How are we going to do that when at certain levels we can't have people in the building, or we can have a number of smaller groups in the building, but it's not going to be the same way. So obviously there was a period of mourning and kind of going, oh God, it's awful, and what are we going to do? But then we started looking at what we normally do. And a huge part of our program, as I said, is around arts development, is around conversation, is around kind of bringing people together, is around kind of having those, you know, developing work, developing community projects. So we decided to flip that and kind of go, well, what actually if we do those in, not do them all in the public domain, but carry them out in the public domain and let people know what we do, and therefore engage more people in that, and also create public engagement for things that would never have had public engagement before. And also, what has been the big kind of learning for us during this is to invite the public into spaces that never existed for them before. So invite them into spaces that weren't there, or one would have never thought about during, you know, open times. So I suppose once we made that decision, and also I had a kind of joke when I started here, obviously it was the kind of, you're taking over an organization. One of my big mantras was, God, I wish I was here when the building was opened. I was kind of going, well, now I'm kind of going, well, like probably next summer or in the autumn, we're have an opportunity to reopen the building. So again, to the staff and to anyone that would listen to us, we're saying we're never going to have this opportunity again, both as an organization, but also as a sector, to really engage with what we do and how we can communicate, and more importantly, why we're communicating. So also then with artists, and this was great from the Arts Council, they kind of front-ended all our funding so we could allow spend it in very different ways. So we decided to go along the route of bursaries and residencies and get them out very, very early to get money to artists. But money to artists to pay them to engage with us and their work, rather than just in a kind of transactional, there's a bit of cash for you. And I suppose through that, we had a staff member leave around the same time to go on to another job. And rather than replace that role, we came up with the idea of doing these pop-up departments, to do these kind of experiments over a year. So there'd be no, if it didn't work, fine. If it did work, great. So we developed a kind of pop-up literary department because we couldn't cope with the amount of artists that we wanted to deal with. So an artist came up with the idea, came to us, she got a bursary and is now kind of heading into her second year with us. And through that, guys, and through our other guys, we supported monetarily, resource-wise and developmentally wise over 80 artists in the last year. So I suppose for me, it wasn't just about producing work, because that's not wholly what we do. We do produce plays, and we have done. Like it startled me at the end of the year when we looked at our figures that we produced 140 hours of content in 2020 from March to December. Now that ranged from 10 plays that we recorded and broadcasted online, a live stream, but it also was, we developed this thing called the Access Chats, where again, it was kind of about people. And I was very interested in the public being able to engage with artists and people in the arts sector in a non-transactional way, in a space where they're not coming on to a chat show to sell their kind of latest film. They're coming on to talk about their lives. I started that last March. Little did I think that I'm about to do my 93rd interview next week. But they kind of garnered for Access a huge network of connections. It started off with people that I knew, but now it's kind of grown into people that want to do it, or people that have been kind of suggested to me. So from an institutional marketing point of view, a networking point of view, that's been an incredible kind of boon. Our music was a big part of our first iteration. We started these things called the Access Sessions, which again, and there's an awful lot of conversation in the first session about technology and you know, the trick around that and the expense of that and the kind of, I suppose, the learning around that. But for us, what was key at the beginning, it was that, you know, the digital aspect of work in this pandemic is actually a mechanism rather than what you're doing. So when you integrate with the digital aspect of it, if you have agreed based upon your own value system of what you want to do, then that's just a learning mechanism to get that across. So we kind of very much at the early point of view, we hadn't got the gear. We had, you know, said, okay, we're not going to wait 6 months to do something. So I saw that some pubs were doing streamed gigs from people's houses. So I contacted a few artists, and it was amazing. It kind of got me through the early part of it. From April, May, June, and July, we had a singer-songwriter from their home every week or 10 days, and they played a set on Facebook Live, and it was free, and it was donations if you want. But in the same way that Anne Clark was talking about the amazing kind of live piece, what was amazing was looking at the chats on that, and you had people from Canada and people from, you know, all over the world logging in, and also acts who weren't at a level where they would get more than 50 people in our theatre were having an engagement of like over a week, 500 or 600. Now it was like 3,500, you know, views, but actually when you dig down into it, is 500 people kind of watched it. That's extraordinary numbers for like two young singer-songwriters starting out from East Wall. And that was done very easily. That wasn't a big, you know, there wasn't a 4 months thinking process behind that. It was like sort of, what are we going to do? So I suppose the impression might have been that this was all very slapdash. It actually wasn't. It was kind of very much thought out in relation to what we were trying to build. So it went from an initial Access Online program, then around Crinan and No, we kind of went, look, we really need to kind of connect back into our communities. So we linked in with the schools and we gave them art packs, and then we delivered 200 art packs to the local houses, and had singer-songwriters going out and standing at people's gardens and performing. So there was all these, and that was an idea that one of our staff came up with, and we said, yes, so a lot of my job over the last year has been kind of saying yes. And also in relation to the role of an art centre is, and the role of a cultural centre is, like in relation to artists, and an awful lot of time was us kind of getting out of the way. So like an awful lot of the great stuff that came in here last year was an artist coming in with an idea. We're going, actually, yeah, we can do that, and figuring out what the contract is and just doing it. So I think that piece that Neil talked about that yesterday, the amazing thing about turning, I found it totally invigorating, that you can turn an idea around in a day, you know, or you can turn an idea around in a month, which is very difficult before. Sorry, Heather.
Mark, this experimenting thing is just amazing. To be able to say yes like that is extraordinary. But did you have an idea of what success would look like? I mean, did you have an idea of what you wanted to achieve, or was it just more important to experiment?
No, I think it was about not developing experiments into a vacuum. So it was very much about where the engagement was, and that was very much agreed across each of the projects. So obviously, if you're doing Facebook Live events and no one's watching them, you're not going to, you know, you can't afford to keep paying people, and you can't afford to keep giving the resources in for staff to kind of run that. In relation to the Access chats, if people didn't want to be on them, and if people didn't want to watch them, then we'd stop doing that. So I suppose it's kind of nearly flipping the success paradigm. It's exploring the failure of it. So if it doesn't fail, then you keep going and it'll grow. But it's also things that fitted in with what we already do. Like, for example, we have a history of kind of working with artists and new writing. So not all, and previously one of the big things we were hamstrung on is not all those shows would ever get to public engagement because they weren't ready, or we hadn't got the resources to develop things to a full production. But it's been amazing in the few that we've done, like rehearsed readings and recorded rehearsed readings and shot beautifully rehearsed readings that have got massive for rehearsed reading, massive audience reach that they would never have got. And again, that allows the audience into something that they wouldn't have seen before. And also the tech behind that was, I mean, we can't afford, I mean, we applied and got the Arts Council capacity development grant, but the cameras that we're using aren't your TV kind of cameras. They're very, very good Sony, cameras that can record video. Because we again agree, we're not going to be in competition with Netflix and BBC. So yes, it's important that the quality of the sound actually more so, and the quality of the video is up to a certain amount. But audiences really dug into the fact that this was kind of a bit, anarchic's the wrong word, but a bit, and that's why we call it Access Bootleg, a bit kind of, a bit anarchic and a bit you don't know what's going to happen. So like we had a series of 10 conversations over Zoom with Lorraine Marr, who's an artist based in originally contemporary based in London, who spoke to a range of people about identity in the arts. And she interviewed people from Emma DeBarry to Maureen Kennelly to Dylan Coburn. So, and again, those conversations were live. I wasn't sitting there. There's a big, huge part of me letting go, because we were giving the Access platform to other people. So, for example, a guy with the guitarist from a brilliant band called the Lazarus Soul got on to me and said, had we any advice, he wanted to release this live concert that he had filmed himself doing in this cathedral in Nice. And I went, well, sure, we'll do it for you. And he went, really? I went, yeah, absolutely. So we gave him, we bought the license off him and we distributed it for him. We're in talks this year with kind of other acts that are kind of doing that. Because, and even the way Dublin Port, the Pump House series came to us, where there was 3 brilliantly new film plays that we had been involved in certain ways with before, and certainly had a huge relationship with the writers. It was the artists and Dublin Port that came to us asking us to executively produce that, because we had the wherewithal in relation to, they were originally discussing just putting them out onto YouTube, and we went, no, you have to make them events. So all those things that you would normally do as a venue that has a ticketing system became a massive resource for us here. Mentioned, Rob was talking about social media. That became really interesting to us. And I think, you know, Facebook would be our huge, not necessarily selling, but community engagement, say with our local kind of Dublin, North Dublin community. And things that get real traction and have done for years for us is not necessarily our events, but about people in the area, or, you know, being a community notice board. So we went, okay, our presence on social media has to be the way we have our presence in real life. We have an open door policy. We have very strict policies in relation to the organization, that we respond to emails as soon as we can. We don't leave people hanging for months. We kind of, you know, if we say we can't. And so I think similarly, and this took an awful lot of time, both personally and for the organization, but we had to take it as a fun way, is that we were very responsive on social media. So Access felt like a living organism rather than a venue. I struggle with that word venue in the best of times. I really struggle with it during this time. And even like Access is not just a theater. So it's kind of it's a resource. So I became very interested in what that resource means. So even like yesterday morning, we were doing a workshop on climate adaptation with a range of Leaving Cert students from the different schools. So what we've done with that is that will be broadcast for other schools, not to the public, but other schools will get that as a resource in relation to their schoolwork. We also have developed like conversations around Leaving Cert online on Zoom, but they're very easy. I mean, that's just Zoom. That's just us paying a few people to talk about things, but they've got really, really interesting engagements. The whole area of conversation has become fascinating to me. Sorry, I feel like I'm wathering on here.
Mark, can you say a little bit more about what the difference is between an event and just putting something on YouTube? How are you defining an event?
An event is when it goes onto our ticket solve and you can look at it. So when you go to book, when you go to book for Bang Bang at Christmas and you go through ticket solve, you will also see a full page on the ticket solve homepage of like, you know, a chat with Roxanne and Nick McLean and 2 young students about women in poetry. You know, you'll have Lorraine Mars, so they're all there. And again, that kind of turns out where it's Access. We don't have, we kind of have long time ago banned the word outreach from our organization. It's all one, do you know what I mean? So we see all those things as different manifestations of what we do rather than a hierarchy of program. So I think that's kind of been to our benefit through this. So we're engaging, you know, at similar times with local people in the area around, like it's our 20th anniversary this year, but also in 2001, Bloody Sunday, the film was shot in Ballymun. So we're developing a podcast around that. So on one level, we're talking on Facebook to people about kind of sending in their data, or sorry, their input into that, while we're also developing a new play for presentation at the end of March.
Now, the one big thing that you'd say to other art centres, venues, whatever we want to call them, about how they might look at the coming months, what would be the one big thing that you would say to them, that your big message?
I think it's literally, don't feel pressurized into doing something that you can't do or that you don't want to do. Because if you don't want to do it, it's not going to work. Do you know what I mean? Like, there's things that I don't want to do here. So either I'll get someone else to do. You know what I mean? There's things that I don't want to do. There's things that we can't do. Like, we can't do what Landmark brilliantly have done. So I'm kind of going, we can't do that. The business model is not there for us. We you know, but we can partner with people and use your platform. I think you don't know what you have, because we have facilitated rakes of artists, rakes of production, of small production companies. Like, we got a whole new writing festival by a conversation from the core ensemble, and they went up on Zoom live every Tuesday night. But that was very little work from us. We had to do a bit of tech around, you know, getting them live, but that was theirs, and they were paid. You know, we supported them in doing that. So I think it can get very tricky about kind of the workload coming in and kind of submerging you. The workload is actually being able to step back, and we very much, it's been alert online. It's been alert to what people are looking at, being alert to trends. It takes time. It really does take time. But it's no different to in a normal open world where your role, I believe, as an artistic director or as a producer or as whatever it is to listen. And I think that's the major thing. And just one thing which is very important for us right at the beginning, and an awful lot of artists and the public have responded to us, is when we decided we weren't closed, we also said we're here. And that's a really interesting thing to say, you're here, you know, both as a person in your role, as different people in the organization, or as the organization, that you can contact us and we will get back to you. And it's at the very initial point of this, there was so much fear in the arts sector. There was so much fear from everybody that, yes, artists required the financial funding and resourcing, but also they just required someone that they can pick up a phone to and have a chat. And that might sound very, you know, airy-fairy, but it absolutely was fundamental. And that would also be in relation to someone from the community who used to come in here and have the tea with their daughter or whatever, that they can't do that now. It's reaching out to them, and there's always a phone. Do you know what I mean? So I would say, don't be scared of digital. The digital is only one way of doing things. And I agree with the speakers yesterday. It's a really all-encompassing world. I don't believe there is an online audience. I think there are people who use online, and I think there's been a major opportunity to engage with people who have never engaged with Access or theatre or whatever, and don't even know what that means. But I think the opportunity in this time to develop an understanding of theatre, to actually, it's like a trailer. I'm viewing this as a trailer for live theatre. So this period is the best trailer we'll ever have to sell what we have when we reopen.
Oh, brilliant! Just the energy coming out of Access in the current situation is truly amazing. I'm really interested. You've been talking about how important collaboration is, and that seems to be a collaboration with your communities, with artists, as well as within the arts sector. So I think I'm going to bring in Louise here as chair of NASC Touring Network, because I think your collaboration is really interesting as well. Louise, I mean, NASC is experimenting too with different ways of engaging audiences online. It'd be really good to know what you've all learned from that. You know, what would be your optimum way of presenting touring work?
Thanks, Heather. I suppose we haven't really settled down yet as to what is the optimum, and I would like to comment about the session earlier as well, if we had that. And I think Rob said that earlier on, if only we had that back in May and June, when we were scrambling, looking around for ways to reach our audiences, it would have been so fantastic, because those kind of issues, the questions that the people were enunciating were the kind of questions I think we all had when we were looking at this possibility. But for NASC, we first of all, it was a hugely supportive and important platform that we had together, the 8 venues. We met very regularly initially at the start, just to try and cope with the tsunami of issues that were hitting us. And then as time moved on, and we particularly then once we started getting ready for what we hoped but didn't turn out to be the reopening in September, just supporting each other in terms of the kind of issues we were facing. But then in September, when we really started talking about streaming seriously. It was Fergal in the town hall who did the first foray into it with just after the Galway, if people remember, the Galway International Arts Festival had a number of days and they did live streaming from the town hall. And then subsequently, Fergal had a joint, what we would call a hybrid, where he had a live gig with Sean Keane with about the limit at that time in the town hall. He could have 47 people, I think it was, he could have in the theatre, but also live streaming it to an audience. Now, subsequently, then what we then looked at in terms of the success of it, what we felt was the best option was to have something that the venues could either mostly pre-record and then stream together as a unit, either on specific dates or on the same date. And the first opportunity that came up for us at that point was with the Tom Crean Antarctic Explorer. Now, Aidan Dooley had during the summertime, because he knew venues where a lot of people were losing events in the autumn, he put it, I think it was about 9 or 10 day tour together. He came over in September, was quarantining for 2 weeks, and then, as we all know, the level 3 kicked in about the second week of October, just 1 week before the first gig, which was to be in the Lime Tree Theatre. So Fergal had been talking to him. I mean, we all knew at the time, you know, the case numbers were rising. People were starting to get a bit nervous in, you know, mid to late September, early October, that we might not necessarily get to stay open. So Fergal independently had been talking to Aidan about recording it and live streaming it in joint session, the way he had done the Sean Keane gig, where he'd have a small number of audience in the theatre, but also people watching it online. And then when level 3 kicked in, all the venues were closed. I contacted Aidan separately. I said, look, you're in Kerry, come up to us anyway next week. We can still, at that point, we could still have rehearsals, we could still have people working in the building. Let's record it and perhaps let's just live stream it on the night. And then obviously with everyone talking to each other, Fergal realised what I was planning. We realised what we're essentially doing was the same thing. So the Lime Tree facilitated the recording. We got all the venues, most of the people who had been in the 10-day tour, they all, not everybody, because it just didn't suit some venues, but the vast majority of venues said, yeah, we'll continue. We will stream it on the night that we had intended to perform it live. And the Lime Tree recorded the session, recorded it and sent out the link to each different venue. And Ticketsolve, whom Mark mentioned earlier, then had set up all the virtual foyers in each venue. So that worked particularly well. And I suppose even looking back on it, since we've tried other models, in a sense, that sense of occasion, that sense of this is the night it's on, it's streaming from the Lime Tree. I'm not so sure many of the audience, we didn't specify that had been pre-recorded, but the fact that it was the first time people could attend an event in the Lime Tree, not really, if you know what I mean, but certainly see something, it did create a lot of traction. Then moving on from that model, there were other companies who approached us, and then the Pavilion did some as well. They did some pre-records, and it wasn't necessarily NASC limited, because we Live in Dread also did a production of A Christmas Carol. Erin and Brian Burrows together, and they pre-recorded in the Pavilion, and then again sent out the link they had a very similar situation. They had a tour planned, live tour through November and early December, and so all of those dates were gone, and instead they sent people the link. And in fact, and this we learned as we went, we couldn't take the live version of A Christmas Carol because we had something, we just didn't have availability in the way things had been planned. But then when we were closed, obviously everything was cancelled. So I was able to ring Aaron and say, can we have a date for A Christmas Carol? So we managed to he had a free night, but the way they wanted to do it was similarly that the venues wouldn't take it just randomly for, you know, a week and all stream it for a week. What they also stuck to the same dates that were originally planned for the live show. And I think that really works, to go back again to the whole thing of each regional, their venue reaching their own audiences in that occasion, that it's on this night. And we also, it's worth noting as well, we also took it during the day, as did other venues, for a school's engagement. So then, you know, I don't know if that's, there's one other final model, I suppose, which is the live, where you're live streaming it from a single venue. And we're now about to go into together the NASCAR. We teamed up with Druid. They're doing Once Upon a Bridge next week. And where we're doing is we're marketing the show locally and on our website. But the audience then will click on the link to go straight to the Druid website and get the link for viewing the stream directly from Druid Lane. So in a way that is also the whole technicalities around that. Had we a little bit more time maybe to plan for it, it's a bit of a hybrid situation there. What we would really like to do in that scenario, but we weren't able to do it because just there was a combination of factors, mostly time, was that we would sell the tickets and then send people with the electronic link to the Druid stream. And I think that's what in the future, if we're going to do that, you know, and both Druid is very willing to do that as well, and I'm sure other companies, but that would be the ideal, in the sense that we stay in connection. The whole thing is engagement with our own local audience. And that's for the NASC venues, you know, for many venues, that's the key issue, that you know, we're not able to produce, we're not producing venues by and large. We can't produce the likes of the Approach or Once Upon a Bridge, because that's not what we do. But what we do very well is engage with our own local audience, and whatever it is we can present to them, we're literally open and, you know, ready to hear what's there, and work with companies to stream to those local audiences from our own individual websites. So
that's really interesting. I mean, we all know from our audiences that they're really hungry to return safely to live performance. But do you think online they care whether something's live streamed or pre-recorded if it's got a specific start time?
I don't know. The jury is out on that a bit at the moment. Anecdotally, for myself, and talking to other people, other audiences, in the context, say, for instance, of the Approach last week, it was that occasion, that sense of occasion, was really what made people want to, and forced us, in fact, to sit down on the couch at 7:30 or whatever time it was, and watch. Whereas if it's a stream that's running for, say, 3 nights, you know, people say, oh, look, I'll watch it Thursday night, and then something happens. Well, I can always watch it Friday night. And then by the time the 3 nights have passed, suddenly the opportunity is gone and they haven't watched it. So I think we need more information, but certainly the feeling with us is that we want to make sure that people engage with us. What's the best way to do that? Is, I think at the moment, is just get the content up there and out there, and then let's see what works best. Because that the other part is that there had been quite mixed, to be fair and to be honest about it, quite mixed in terms of the results, in terms of the numbers of engagement with the live streaming and with the streaming, whether it's live or pre-recorded. You're mute, Heather.
Can you see any patterns? Can you see what's working and what's not?
Well, certainly the engagement with schools for us certainly has been really quite eye-opening. We have a festival in early October, the Boolabus Children's Festival, and one of the key things is always an issue for any venue, for children to engage them, to get them to come in, is particularly if the schools that they live that bit further out away from where the venue is, they have to get a bus, they have to make sure the bus is back in time before the school bus leaves the school, and that will depend on the age group of the children, and then the expense of both the bus and the ticket price. And particularly rural schools, we find it can be harder to get them to engage. But we partnered with Music Generation Limerick for Bula Bus, and they recorded a number of workshop sessions in the Bell Table about a week just at the end of September, nearly October, and then we streamed it. I have to keep saying live stream. We streamed it into the classrooms, and because schools now have really good equipment, many of them, even rural schools, do have very good broadband. They have projectors. They project the event onto the screen. So you have a captive audience with the teacher there, obviously the captive audience of the children watching the workshop being streamed into their classroom. And we got an enormous response from the schools on that, and also on the other shows that we had, where we had a matinee performance for schools. We reckon with the workshops in Bula Bus, we reached about 2,500 children with 4 workshops. Now that, under normal circumstances, under the usual way of bringing them in, no way would you wouldn't even be able to accommodate 2,500 children. So in that sense, there's a real future there. While we still want to make sure that the children do engage with the live performance and with the live events, certainly there is great scope with that in the future.
What about adult audiences? I mean, but in the UK, all our hopes are vested in Panto at Christmas time. But I'm beginning to wonder whether people are getting a bit fed up of Zoom, because most of our schooling is now online.
Yeah, I mean, and I don't have the answer to that, not yet. I don't know, do any of us have the answer to it? I think if the event is big enough, and say if the work is new, for instance, I do have really high hopes for, and I think I'm sure Drew would do too, but for Once Upon a Bridge next week, obviously the approach, that big event, big national event, but we're going to have to try and find something that works regionally as well. We can't all be, it's not always going to get the same kind of traction in terms of national media that the approach and Happy Days got, because they were the first time out. But if we're going to be doing this week in, week out, it's going to be a much harder challenge. And I don't know, maybe I'm just too long in the tooth, but I think that the live experience of the sociability of meeting people, coming into the venue, is going to still trump the online. Because, and as well as that, we have to remember, many of of us, our primary audience are the people around us, the people who are close to us physically. Great if somebody tunes in from Australia to see the Lime Tree Theatre stream of Tom Crean, or 5 or 10 or 20 people do, but and that's great. But fundamentally, the venues in Limerick and Galway and Longford and Tipperary are about the audience in those places, the audience that lives there. That's fundamentally what it's about for me.
Wow. Okay. Thank you very, very much, Louise. That's so interesting. I think what struck me is how important it is that we all continue to share information and experiences and have conversations like this, because it's so hard to know in our own little COVID bubble, what actually is working. What's not working.
Yeah, and I'd really reiterate that. I mean, we have weekly conversations every Friday afternoon, and they really do. They're keeping me sane anyway, and I know they're keeping the other venue managers, just on top of everything, because no more than the wider population, and everyone talks about people's mental health and this kind of stresses everybody is under, that human connection with people who are facing the same problems and the same issues and the same questions as you is enormously supportive. So if you're not in a network and if you're not meeting people, I'd really encourage you to do that, because it just makes life easier, really, right now.
Absolutely. I feel so joyful just seeing all these faces in front of me, people who I've not seen for 18 months, 2 years now. So great to see you all. Thank you very much, Louise. That's absolutely wonderful. I'm really looking forward to hearing from Caroline, because, oh, Caroline, Dublin Dance Festival really had to be amongst the pioneers, didn't they? I mean, you launched the 2020 festival online because people were already super cautious, but then just 10 days later, you had to cancel the lot. I mean, how on earth did you develop a digital alternative so quickly?
Hi, Heather, and hi, everyone. It's really lovely, as other people have remarked, to see so many faces and see people that we normally share the building with and meet out and about. So yes, as you mentioned, we were right in the thick of it. We were in the middle of launching our 2020 festival when COVID hit. So as the saying goes, necessity is the mother of invention in this case. Our brochures were printed, flights were booked, our contracts were signed. But there was a growing sense of unease as we approached that date, that launch event on March 10th, about gathering, having a social gathering of any kind. So we decided to bite the bullet and cancel that physical launch event and go ahead and launch the 2020 program online. And as you said, then that was March 10th. And 10 days later, by March 20th, we were announcing the cancellation of our 2020 edition. Obviously, that was hugely disappointing for all of the artists and the companies involved, and for the team and audiences and just all the people we work with. So in those first few weeks, from a communications point of view, everyone was really dealing with so much uncertainty and so many challenges and hardships and worries. So we focused on, taking those decisions promptly and delivering our communications with as much clarity as we possibly could. We then went about, unproducing the festival, as we've all become familiar with this process, and reimbursing tickets and the like. And then we stopped when we emerged from that process. We stopped and we asked ourselves some questions. We asked ourselves, similar to what Mark was saying, if we can't present live performance this May, and up until then, there had been very much a focus on what we can't do. So we said, okay, well, what can we do? How can we wanted to continue to inspire our audiences and to celebrate dance. We wanted to support our artists and retain a connection with our community at this time. So when we started thinking about our communications and our content plan, we kind of went back to marketing basics, which is really to put, the essence of marketing is to put the customer at the center of all your activity and work from there and think about their needs. So in our case, we thought about who are our customers, our audiences, our artists, our stakeholders. So looking at our audiences, we started out with a very, with brainstorming and a giant Excel spreadsheet. We started mapping out some of our audience's broad needs at this time in the new needs that they might have in this changed context, a context that was changing and evolving. And we try to gather those needs into pillars, like communications pillars and content pillars. So for example, we thought about people would need entertainment and escapism. Participation and community was another pillar. Movement and well-being, people were stuck at home and their worlds had shrunk and they needed to move about. Learning and education, some people were trying to use that time of lockdown to learn new things and new skills. And so we gathered around these pillars, and then we started to consider and to talk about what kinds of digital content and online activity that DDF could bring as an organisation that could answer some of those needs in a meaningful and relevant and appropriate way, that wasn't tone deaf to the struggle that people were facing at that time. And then at the same time, Benjamin Perche, our artistic director, and Karina McGrail, our executive producer, they were speaking with artists, staying in touch with our festival artists, collaborating with them, and discussing ways, asking them, how they might like to contribute to something online, what kinds of content they thought would be valuable to share about their work. what they were comfortable with sharing online or not, and what kind of ideas they had for the different ways that we could communicate about the work. So I suppose what we decided very early on was that we were not trying to create an online version of our existing festival program. Simply at that time, that wasn't even possible. Some of the work was still in rehearsal, it still had to be made, and it certainly wasn't available in a filmed format that would have been suitable for broadcast. So yeah, we decided that early on that this wasn't going to be an online version of our festival. We wanted to try and create something that was different, something new, that wasn't a replacement, but that offered a chance to experience dance, to still celebrate dance and our dance artists in May, as we do every year, to get to know the artists and their work in new ways, and to engage with the work in new ways and engage with dance in new ways. And we wanted it to be something that could hold its own space, separate to and alongside live work. So, and that would continue to hold that in the future whenever that became possible again.
I know you talk a lot about it being a digital capsule. Where did that idea of a capsule come from, and what does it mean in terms of the audience experience?
So Benjamin was putting together this edit of materials, and we were all collaborating as a team for people to engage with. So films, discussions, articles, interactive dance experiences. And he referenced this idea from the world of fashion of a capsule collection. And we all kind of loved that. And so from that, we started thinking about, a capsule collection, and then how this could be a digital capsule, obviously also talking about that idea of a time capsule, collecting materials that we could put together to reflect this moment that we find ourselves in. So that was where the DDF digital capsule was born. And then we brought in then our long-standing design and communications agency, AAD, and their sister company, Wove, into the mix, our longtime collaborators. And we asked them to work with us in a really fast, by necessity, and collaborative way to figure out how we could bring that capsule to life in the most engaging and effective way online. Again, at that time, there were so many demands on people, both online and offline. So we decided the best approach would be to make it radically simple to engage with, to understand, and to get on board with. So what we did was we developed a really strong visual identity for the capsule, which would distinguish it from our other festival communications of content and things that we were sharing as we went along, and also distinguish it from our 2020 festival program as something new, as something different. We decided to go bright, really bright and clean and vibrant with it, so that it would have the standout on our channels, stand out in the digital space for people sharing, so that there would be a sense of occasion. Again, the online space was very, very, and still is obviously a really busy space, and there was a lot of content sharing at that time. So we just wanted to make it jump out. And then we said, okay, well, let's make our website, let's make that the primary destination. Let's, again, thinking about how can we make this easy for our audiences to engage with. So we said, okay, we'll make that our primary destination. And we actually replaced it. We replaced the website with a simplified temporary site that scaled back on the distractions, removing other, extra material, and meaning that when people, it was like a digital intervention as such. So when people arrived to our website, they were immediately in the capsule, and they could engage really directly with the content in the program. And we then thought about our users in two very kind of broad and distinct categories, to be able to provide very clear pathways for them to access what will be relevant for them. So we looked at our audience in terms of the general public, so everyone from dance, really, you know, hardcore dance fans to curious newbies. And then we our second audience were our dance and arts, the wider arts community. So we organized our content and events into those two program strands, and then, as I said, provided really clear pathways for people when they landed on the website to follow.
Your messaging is so clear. You're so clear about what the two propositions were for those audiences. It was really.
Thanks. We just thought that was again just trying to make it that, you know, clear and simple for people to get there. So in terms of so we came up with this idea of 10 days of movement for in a world of restriction for our general audience group. And that was our, you know, curated selection of films and articles. And, you know, we had an interactive app. People could bring dancers, you know, into their own environment. We had a tiny dancer for kids. We had all sorts of things. And then we had 3 moments of connection, which was our second strand for the dance and the wider arts community. And that was that opportunity to come together and consider together and discuss our change world and where we would go from there. We decided to make all our events and content free of charge. We were, again, really grateful for the continued support of the Arts Council. And we made all our events freely accessible, free of charge. And most of it was published on the website each day. So at 11 o'clock each day, we published a new item. And then a small number of events required registration for some participative events and limited screenings. But that was kept to a minimum, again, to simplify.
So I can't believe that it's February already. May is fast approaching.
Yes.
That's your 2021 festival. What have you learned from the 2020 experience that will shape your 2021 edition?
So much. We've learned so much, and from our own experience and from then witnessing the experience of our brilliant colleagues in the arts who are doing amazing things all the time that we also can learn from. I suppose we've learned really the importance of staying agile, of staying flexible, and being aware that being able to change plans quickly and efficiently. With that in mind, we're taking a modular approach to 2021. So we're looking at a hybrid program of digital and live events taking place in May and at other moments throughout the year. Of course, our focus in May will be primarily digital, as you know, restrictions and things have evolved. And then we hope that later in the year there will be other moments for live performance and some digital content to accompany that. So we're taking, as I said, modular, breaking it down into chunks so that we can react to opportunities and changes as they come along. So I suppose we're expecting 2021 to be another very unique and a reactive year in many ways. But at the same time, we're seeing the opportunity, we're trying to see the opportunity in that from a digital point of view, and seeing it as an opportunity to continue on a strategic direction of travel that we were already on, and that we already had identified that we wanted to build our digital dance community, that we wanted to engage audiences throughout the year. As an annual festival, I know all my festival colleagues will attest to that. One of our biggest challenges is figuring out how to keep that engagement with audiences throughout the year and outside of that festival period, which can be just 2 or 3 weeks in the year. So this is something that is constantly a challenge for us.
Is everything going to be free again?
No, we will certainly be looking at different models of how to do that. We'll be testing our ticketing models. We'll be looking at pricing structures, looking at different ways to deliver it now that we've had more time to evolve those structures. We'll be developing our broadcasting platforms and evolving our website to become more of a flexible space for us to, you know, host these kind of digital capsules. You know, one big thing that the capsule gave us was that it gave us that opportunity to test and to experiment, which we will continue in 2021, to test different types of content with our audiences and to see what people responded to. So that we, you know, so we plan to build on that to provide more context for the work that the art and for the artists that we present, and an overall richer online experience. We'll also be, oh, go ahead.
How are you going to change your comms? I mean, it strikes me that you're talking about a very different kind of things. So if you've got that mix of paid for and free events, how are your comms changing?
Yeah, we'll have to, you know, I suppose one big goal is to develop our audiences and to find, you know, as we're going to be focusing on deepening the relationship with our current existing audiences and with our dance fans. And then we're going to be doing a lot more audience research and building out audience profiles so that we can understand their behavior in more detail and find more ways to reach out to those audiences online that may not have had the chance to access the festival before, or that may not know about us, but that we can see have similar behaviors or similar interests. So we'll be collaborating with our digital agencies to find more of those audiences online and targeting things. We'll be looking at our content strategy and, you know, finding out, you know, basically looking at how we can evolve that content strategy to continue those conversations and to really provide more context for the performances that we're giving. And we'll be, I suppose, marketing also to, you know, obviously we'll be looking at getting people to register for events and buy tickets, and that's all. It's all to be figured out, and we're in the process of working all that out. So watch this space.
Wow, that's so scary. Thank you so much, Caroline, for being so open about what you're doing.
Thank you.
A huge task compressed into not very much time. And I think what's been really interesting is such different organisations, but some really common threads are coming through. And so what about your comments and questions for the speakers? You've been using the chat already, but you've got a couple of minutes now to ask the speakers anything in your chat, using your chat function, and we'll ask the speakers anything that you have in mind. I think for me, what's come across really, really strongly is how important experimentation is. You know, we're in a completely new set of experiences, and things keep on getting new and different and bizarre. So the importance of experimentation, but then the importance of sharing our experiences and our information and also our resources comes across really important. Unless we do talk to each other, we're going to not really understand how audiences are engaging across the country. So any questions or comments? Does anyone want to ask anything? Okay. What I love about conferences is bumping into people I would never, ever meet, ever, and sharing experiences with them. So I think Emma and Samantha are going to divide us randomly into breakout groups. There's no agenda. So this is really a space for you to talk about the issues and experiences around engaging audiences online that are important to you. We'll then come back together. So Anna and Irma from Theatre Forum can bring this amazing 2 days to a close. So we'll go into breakout groups, probably groups of maybe between 5 and 10. You've got 20 minutes, 15 to 20 minutes, and then we'll come back for a closing moment. So go for it. Divide us up, and all we have to do is
divide you up now? So I've opened all rooms, guys. Some of you are joining us, some of you are not, as I can see. But I will try and ensure there's at least a few of you in a group. So it should be coming up on your screens now if you'd like to join. Happy mingling. Okay, you should all be getting a request on your screen. Okay. Those of you still on the screen, I'm not sure whether you're not seeing the request or it might be that you just don't want to join. That's fine as well.
Will we do a little waiting room like we did yesterday?
Yeah, so if anybody does not want to join the breakout rooms, I will be, unfortunately, I'll have to put you back into the waiting room. So, and then we'll ask you to come back in once the breakout room sessions are over. So if you don't want to go out into the breakout rooms, you will have to be popped into the waiting room. Okay. So that's more or less everybody in the room, around 5, 6 in each. So just a few more people going in. Fab. Okay. Yeah. Right. No, thanks, Emma. So 10 in the waiting room. Right, I'm just checking because the breakout rooms, you've got to make sure as well. Some people will come in and then they will say that they're not assigned, so you have to then go back.
Let's stop recording.
Yeah.
I think so, because even the bit at the end is just thank you.